Okay, good morning, everyone. I am Deanne Dekle, Youth Services Consultant for the New Mexico State Library. And somebody asked if I would do a session on how to use Google Forms because that is my preferred method for just about anything and everything. And I said yes, because I love Google Forms and I want you all to love Google Forms just like I do. So feel free to stop me with questions at any time, either in the chat or unmute yourselves. I will be sharing my screen, so it probably will be difficult for me to see the chat until I stop sharing the screen. So if there's a question, if you are not unable to unmute and ask yourself, if someone else feels comfortable enough to unmute and ask the question, that would probably be really helpful. So that way I can answer the question right then and there instead of waiting until the end. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going. Okay, so this is my Google Drive, and that is kind of the most important component is you need to have a Google Drive. And you can set up a Google account attached to any email address. It doesn't need to be a Gmail account. It doesn't need to be, a Google account. It just needs to, so I have my Google account set up to my state email address. So I don't get emails through that, but it allows me to use the Google suite of products as well as have the storage space of the Google Drive, which is really useful. So you can go to accounts.google.com and you will create your Google account. And the big thing is you will, instead of creating a Google email account at Gmail, you will use my current email address instead. And then you will, no, not that. I don't know why it's doing that. Oh, so then you type in your email address that you have. So for me, it would be deanne.dekle@state.nm.us, and then you would follow the prompts to create a Google account. Highly recommend that just for everybody because it really is just a useful tool to have for document storage, and then you can access it, because it gets shared in the quote unquote cloud. So not only are your documents on your computer, but then if you need to access them from a tablet or your phone in a different location, they are there. So once you've created your Google account, you will go to your Google Drive. And this is what my Google Drive looks like. I have things put into folders everywhere because that's how my brain works. If something is in a folder, I can find it more easily. And then over here on the left-hand side, you will see these options. Now, if someone shares a document with you, that's where you would find it, in the Shared With Me folder. My Drive is where you have all of your documents that you have uploaded to or created in Google. That's where they live. And up here with this plus symbol and new, if you click that, you will see this is where you can upload any document. So if you create something in Microsoft Word, but you want to store it in your Google Drive, you can just easily transfer it that way. But I really enjoy using these. Google Docs is word processing, so like a Microsoft Word. Google Sheets is the Excel component or version. Slides is like PowerPoint. And then Forms, my favorite thing, yay! So that's what we're going to focus on today is Google Forms. So if you just click it, it will open up a generic form. So I need to, I wonder if I can, there we go. Okay, that was totally in my way. Okay, so it just comes up with this generic form always. And, oh, what's there? Okay, so then you title your form anything you want. So we will do Google Forms, presentation, and then hopefully you spelled things correctly. And up here, this is what your document is called. But if you click on it, it will take what you've named it. And you can change it if you want it to be something else. But I always like that, it's just what you call it. And you can type in anything you want. You know, sometimes when I do surveys, I will put the deadline in here, you know, please fill this out by X date and X time. And then it just gives you a generic question box. And you can say, and as you see, the default choice is multiple choice. But as you start typing in what kind of question it is, it will recognize what it thinks it should be. So short answer is pretty much what you want for a name. When I put in library name, name, your job title, things like that, those are short answer. All the options are paragraphs. So if you want to give like a big box for people to type in, multiple choice, which is people can only pick one option, check boxes where they can pick multiple options, drop down menu, and then you can choose the choices. The linear scale, so how do you feel about this on a scale of 1 to 5? Multiple choice grid, which I have, that is a somewhat new addition, and I'm very happy about because that is on the summer reading parent surveys when it says, how do you feel your child's on this summer? So like there's, you know, reading more voluntarily, reading skill, reading more voluntarily, trips to the library, reading and vocabulary skills on one side, and then they can choose from increased, decreased, stayed the same, or not applicable. So that's really useful if you have something like that. And then a checkbox grid is the same thing, only they can pick multiple options or date and time. So we'll stick with short answer for that. And then if you want to make the question required, there is this option right here. You just click it. If it turns a color, that means it's required. If it's not colored, then people can skip that question. So if you're collecting data from somebody or from a group of people and you want to make sure you have their name or their email address or their zip code, something like that, and that is really important, then you want to make sure it's required. So when I do a giveaway, I need to know who you are. So for me, that question is always required. And then if you want to duplicate the question, great. This is really helpful if you have some formatting built into it and you don't want to have to go through all the steps to recreate the formatting. But if you're just going to do name and then library name, you know, it's not really necessary to duplicate it, but sometimes it does help. You can delete the question, you can add a photo, and you can upload a photo, which when I did the t-shirt giveaway, I uploaded the picture of all the t-shirts so that way you knew which one you were requesting. And then over here, some more options. So we have let's see, normally I should say, yeah. So import questions from a previous survey, add title and description, add an image, add a video, and then this one is add section. So sections are really useful if anyone remembers the end of summer survey that I did last year, which was, you know, did you do a summer reading program at all? And I made it into sections so that if you said yes, you went one way. If you said no, you went another way. And that was all because of sections. So sections allow you to kind of do more like a choose your own adventure type thing. I know a lot of libraries that did online scavenger hunts last year that used Google Forms, they did them with sections. So if you got the answer correct, you moved to one place. If you got the answer wrong, you know, it probably told you, no, that's wrong, try again. And then you go through the steps for that. So sections is really useful for that. Or if you just want to, you know, add a little more description. So you could say, you know, you don't have to do that, go to a different place. You can just, you know, add more information. So when you do that, when you add sections, it gives you this option. So once you complete section 1, which is that first top one, you can either move on to the next section or you can go to section 3, which we haven't created, or you could just go to submit form. So that's where it allows you to make those kind of jumps around in your form. So I'm going to actually delete this section, and by that you hit the 3 little dots, and then you can duplicate, move, delete, or just merge it into the section above. So I'm just going to delete that, and then you just keep going. So let's create another question. So except that created at the top, and I don't want it to be. So these 6 little dots up here, when you kind of hover your mouse over them, it allows you to move the question. And because I'm on a very small screen, it's giving me, okay. So we're going to do a multiple choice. So which kind of chili is best? And you're going to say red, or green, or Christmas. And that's a required question. So when I started typing, it automatically realized that it was a multiple choice. So one of the cool things it also does is, let's see, do you like chocolate? If I could spell that word. And it's going to give you kind of some suggestions. So it thinks that this is a yes or no or maybe question. So you don't have to type in all of those. You can just choose add all, and it populates it with those choices for you automatically. And of course you can go in and you're like, well, I don't want maybe. Chocolate is a yes or no question. There's no maybe. So you can hit this X and it removes that choice. And then you're done with that question. So then I want to move library name up because I don't like it there. So we're going to put name there, library name there. And I decided we also need an email address in this. So I'm going to create a new question and I'm going to type in email address. And it thinks that it is a short answer question, which is correct. So I'm going to make that a required question, and this will come in handy in a minute, and I'll tell you why. So I want people to tell me their name, their library name, their email address, what kind of chili they like, and do they like chocolate. And now I want to see, what does this Google form going to look like if you take it? So I'm going to hit this little eyeball icon up at the very top of the screen. And this is what the people who take your survey or your, enter into something, this is what they see. So if we had any text that said, fill this out by May 5th at 10 p.m., it would be under there, and it tells you these questions are required. And then you just answer and you hit submit. So I'm actually going to fill this out. And that way you can see what the responses look like. So then I'm going to hit submit, and my response has been recorded. You all are very familiar with that screen with all the forms that I do. So then I'm going to go back to this main page where I used to fill out the form. And up here you see responses 1. And that's where you can see the people that have responded. And this little toggle needs to be turned on in order to accept responses. In the past, I have, copied forms from a year before and have created them now. And because I have turned off the accepting responses, when I copy, that also copies over. And so it's not until someone tells me it's not accepting responses, and then you have to go in and turn it on. So if you are copying forms from one year to another, or you like the format you did on one form, just always make sure that accepting responses is turned on. This, this green kind of cross-looking thing, that will create a spreadsheet of all of your responses, which is really useful. So we're going to create a new spreadsheet, and it's going to copy the title the same. So we're going to create, and then it will open in that Google sheet. So there is the spreadsheet of responses. And as you get more responses, of course, you'll have more lines filled out, but it will also populate every time you have a new response. It will automatically add it to this sheet, which is kind of funny if you're looking at the sheet and then suddenly a new line appears because someone has recorded a new response. And then it's kind of like magic, like, ooh, new things adding. Up here, these 3 dots. So this is, I find useful sometimes, get email notifications for new responses. So when I do the end of summer surveys, I click this and it emails me every time that someone has added a new response, because I keep track of who responds to the end of summer librarian survey on a different spreadsheet. So every time I see there's a new response, I come in, I look to see who it is, and then I can mark them off my list. So that way I know that when the libraries have responded. You can download the responses into a separate Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. You can unlink it. You can print it. I've never printed the responses, or you can delete all the responses, or you can delete individual responses. So when you, the default screen here is a summary, which it's going to tell you everybody all at once. So it's going to have my name, and then Patricia's name, and then Carmelita's name, and then Dale's name, and then Eli's name, and then the library name. And it will actually give you kind of charts of, you know, if 3 people said NMSL, it's going to give me a pie chart of NMSL. And then if 1 person types in New Mexico State Library, that's another entry in the pie chart. And then that's, so something like that. So right now, 100% of people think that red chili is the best. Or you can look at individual responses. And if there has been, you know, if someone has filled this out incorrectly and has told you like, oh, I didn't mean to fill that out, you can go in and you can delete an individual response if you want. So there's that. So that is kind of the responses. So we'll go back to questions. And I think it's here in the settings. Yes. So in the settings, what I have found really useful, especially for the end of summer surveys, is collect emails and response receipts. So if this is clicked, once somebody fills out this survey, they will receive an email back from Google with a copy of all of their answers, which is really useful. And then when someone says, you know, I turned in my survey, but I don't have a record of it, I will say, did you get an email back from Google with the response? And then if they say yes, I can say, oh, forward that to me. Something happened with the system and it just didn't log. And if they say no, then I'll say, I didn't receive it either. So it's always a nice kind of double check to say, you know, if you don't receive a copy of your responses, then that means I also don't have a copy of your responses. You can limit to 1 response. If that's not clicked, then people can answer to their heart's content. Edit after submit and see summary charts and text responses. I never do those, but feel free to. And then so you can save. And then let's see, this is where you can change the color. So the default is always this purple, and you can change it to, you know, any number of, you know, these are kind of the ones that come preset, or you can click this plus button and try to navigate this whatever color selection and pick your own color. So someone is unmuted. Is there a question, or did we just not mean to? Okay, there we go.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there we go. So you can add that color and it will change it, even though that was very similar to the previous color. And you can also change the font style, or you can change the header image. So this part of the form. So is there a question?
I do have a question. This is Jared with the Village of Columbus.
Hi.
Now, hi. The presentation is fantastic too, by the way. You're really
Thank you.
detailed in telling. The link that you have there, so you can add that to a form, a flyer, an email that you're sending out.
Yes.
Now, and so if you're using a flyer, for example, can that be retitled to say click here and it's associated with that link, something along those lines, or do you have to just copy and paste the entire link?
So up here in this send box, there's a couple options. So I never email the link. I always do this middle one, which is the URL. And there is an option to shorten it, which would help in something like a flyer. But you might also want to think about making it a QR code, which, anyone with a smartphone can just, you don't even need a separate app. You can just put your camera on, the camera on your smartphone. You can aim it at a QR code and it will automatically say, do you want me to open this up in a website? So something like that might be helpful. But I definitely always use the shortened URL, because if not, trying to put that link on a flyer or anything, no one's going to be able to type that correctly. So I would go with short. And unfortunately, you can't personalize the links. They just kind of have to be this generic Google link URL.
But a QR code is fantastic. Okay.
Yeah. And there's lots of, you can just Google QR code generator.
Yes.
And there's lots of them that will just do it for free. And then you just take that, it comes out as a JPEG and you just, put that on your flyer.
Yes. Okay. No, fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So, so that's the sending. So you can email people the link. So, if I wanted to send this only to Carmelita, I could do so. And, there's the message, it comes a generic message, or you can, hey, will you test this out for me? Or will you fill this out? Something like that. You can embed it. So if you want to put a form on your website, you can copy and paste this code and put it into your HTML programming of your website. And I do not have the skills to do that. I have tried to change some code on some things on our blog, The Hitchhiker, and it was probably one of the greatest achievements of my career when I was able to manage to figure out how to do that, because I am not a coder. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. But if you have that ability, then here is your HTML embed code. It will allow you to share the form via your Facebook or your Twitter page. I am just a fan of copying the link, shortening it, copying, and putting it wherever I need it to be. So, so there's that. These three little dots will give you a little more abilities. So if you want to add a collaborator, you can, and that gives that collaborator the ability to edit the form as well. So if multiple people are working on a form, so if I wanted to add Carmelita as a collaborator, I would, and then she would be able to be an editor. So, and that's really helpful if you want someone to proofread it before you send it out, or, if there's multiple people working on the project and you want them to be able to have access to the responses, adding them as a collaborator is definitely the way to go. So I will not send this to Carmelita because she will probably be like, why am I getting all these messages from Google? So once you send it out, you can edit questions, but I don't recommend that, because then you don't have consistency among your responses. So just think about that if you go to edit questions after you've already had responses. So if you don't have any responses and you see that there's a misspelling or something, I mean, you could change that at any point, but if you decide to change a question, and the information that you'd be collecting from that question, you want to make sure you do that before you have any responses. Or you can go in, delete that response, tell the person, can you fill it out again? Something like that. So I think that might be it, unless, I mean, I know there's some chats going on. Questions, let's see. So Leanna says you can use Bitly, which is really nice. If you add an editor, are they allowed to see the responses? Yes. So if you don't want them to see the responses, don't add them as an editor. You can have them, like I've sent the form to Carmelita before as a viewer to make sure that, especially if I have sections, to make sure that they make sense, that, you know, if you answer one way, you go to this screen, and if you answer another way, you go to a different screen, to make sure that those make sense and that those go to the right places. Because sometimes if you've been working on a form for quite a while, it can be a little confusing to yourself, and because you know what you want it to say, does it actually say that to a person not so closely involved? So I will send the I will send it to Carmelita and say, can you run through this really quick? Not as an editor, but as a user, just to make sure that it makes that all the steps are in the right place. So I lost that screen. There we go. Okay. There you go. Sam says you can also revoke editor status at a later time if for some reason you need to. So that's always useful. Any other questions? I mean, this is just kind of the basics of Google Forms. And yeah, go right ahead.
I was using Google Forms to allow parents to sign up for programming since we were at limited capacity. Do you know if there's a way for the spot they sign up for or the question that they answer to delete itself, I guess?
So like if you reach capacity type thing?
Like for example, if somebody wanted to sign up for story time tomorrow at 10, then they select 10 a.m. for their spot. And it would delete it for everyone else so that no one else can sign up for it.
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
You would have to, and so that's when having them email you or having Google email you when there's a response would come in handy, because then you could see instantly when someone responds, and then you could go in and you have to delete it yourself manually.
Okay, that's the way I was doing it. I was just wondering if there was an easier way.
Yeah, and I did that a couple weeks ago when I had like 8 shirts to give away kind of last minute, and as people selected them, I was going in really quick and deleting that option from the form, so that way people couldn't select it after they were already claimed. So
okay,
something like that. It's
that's the way I've just been doing it.
Yeah, it takes a little time, but it is also kind of worth it. So
yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. So any other questions? There's a lot you can do with these. I recommend just kind of poking around and making fake ones and just to see what it does. There's a lot of uses for it. It's a great way, to have people sign up for things, to get information, to, if you're trying to find out from your community, what is it that you want from the library when we reopen? You could do something like this and start collecting information that way, or as a way for people to sign up. When we do in-person programs and there's registration, I do a Google form, and it's just, your email, your name, your library name, which session of, say summer reading are you signing up for? And that's just a way to keep track of who's supposed to be there, how many things do I need to provide? So it's a great way to collect information that way. So I'm going to stop sharing. So any other questions? Let's see. If you access forms through forms.google.com instead of through Drive, there are a number of templates on that page, which can give you some ideas. Awesome. Let's go see that. I've never done that. I've always just done it through my Google Drive, because then that's where they live. But let's try that. let's see, forms.google.com. I'm going to close that. Awesome. So ooh, these are nice. So template gallery. So they come, with a nice header. The question's already done. So let's look at party invite. Nice. See a nice header. And it's in a language that I don't know. Maybe backwards. I don't know what that is. So what is your name? Can you attend? So like a nice RSVP, which would be nice. How many are attending? What will you be bringing? That's really useful for like a potluck, allergies, email address. So that's really useful. It's a famous Latin poem used as a placeholder text. Look at Sam with all the answers today. I love it. So you could use this generic Latin poem that is a placeholder. So I've made surveys and I've added someone as a collaborator, there we go, and was wondering if that's similar to an editor or if they are completely different. I think that they are the same thing. So it says to add a collaborator. That is what their choice is. But then once you, let's see. Okay, so under the collaborator, you can make them an editor or a viewer and commentator, and they have the option to download, print, and copy, which I don't know how that would be useful, really. So I think why they give the the automatic thing is the editor. So we will add Carmelita, and then down here, let's see. Oh, right there you can change, it's just as an editor. So yeah, essentially a collaborator is the same thing as an editor, unless you unclick that. And then you can just make them a viewer and a commentator. So if you just wanted their feedback on the wording of questions, you can do that. And they could probably just make comments on the side. But at the same token, you could just give, if you don't want them to be an editor, discard, you could just send them the link to take it. And then they could give you the feedback, because then they would only see this part, which is what anyone else would see. So before you send it out widely, you could send it to someone as a collaborator, essentially as that, and they could give you their feedback before you send it to people. And I've done that. That's usually what I do when I want feedback. I will just send the link to, say, Carmelita or Patricia, and have them look at it, help me with the wording or the grammar, or does this question even make sense? And then I would just go back in and change it on my end, and then send it out to everybody. So.
And Deanne, here's another question. This is Jared with the Village again. So my idea with this is to be able to send out a menu to everyone for ordering, and then they have the QR code. They could pop that up, pull it up, fill it out, submit it. I have the email immediately. Can work off that. Yeah,
because you could have a question, or you could have, and not really a question, but up here you could say, here's the link to the catalog. And then there could be, just a paragraph question. You would create the, what items would you like to check out? And I would make that, a paragraph, so people could type in, the title, the author, the call number, the whatever it is. And then, you would get just make sure you have the, get email notifications for new responses. And then that way the email would come to you, and it would say, Jane Doe has filled out your form, and then you click on it and it would, give you that response.
Great. Sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I wanted to show you, I wonder if I can find it. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to try to show you the form that I created for the end of summer last year with all of the different sections. So you can kind of see what that looks like on the back end versus what people who take it see. So just to give you an idea of how elaborate the different sections can be. So I just have to find it first because I've got a lot of stuff on here. Okay, so let me close some of these. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen again so you all can see this. So this was the end of summer survey last year. So I put a header in. As you can see, we had 76 responses. And this is what you all saw. So, except I closed it, so I have to reopen it. There we go. So it was email, library name, your title. And then this is where things went differently. So did your library conduct some sort of summer reading this year? If you said no, and then hit next. And then you hit no. You saw, can you briefly describe why? Does your library want to participate in what is now this year's summer? And if you hit no, that was it. If you hit yes, you got a different set of questions. So if a workshop was possible, would you be willing to host? How many vouchers? And then, so let's do no, and one, and no, and then submit, and then that was it. So now I have to go in and delete that response because it's gonna, you know. So, but if you did a survey or if you did a program, you got a completely different set of questions. So, and then did you offer any in-person programming? No, took you one way. Yes, took you a whole nother way. And it was that way for, I think there was maybe 5 or 6 different sections where, like a choose your own adventure. If you answer one way, you go this way. If you answer another way, you go a completely different way. So the back end of this survey, now I need to go in. I'm gonna delete that real quick. So I'm deleting that response. So that way, you know, it's not one of those, what is this completely gibberish response 9 months later? So everyone had these first questions of your email, your library name, your title. And then on the back end, after section 1, continue 2, and then that is depending on your answer. So here, with yes, you go to section 3. With no, you go to section 2. And that comes from this choice down here, the 3 little dots, go to section based on answer. So if you click, if you make that an option, then you tell it which section you want to go to. So here in my choose your own adventure, if you click yes, you go to section 3. If you click no, you go to section 2. And it goes that way with the next question. So section 2 did not conduct a reading program. And then here's another choose your own adventure. So did your library wish to participate in 21? Yes, go to section 12. No, submit form. So that tells you how many sections I have in this. So there's 12 sections. And that is why I had to have multiple people looking this over before it went out to you all, because it could get very confusing very quickly if you had to, if it sent you to the wrong section based on your answer. So then section 3, programming, did you offer any in-person programming? Yes, took you to 4, no, took you to 5. And so it just goes that way. So that's really useful if you have something where you still want information, but you might need it changed. The information will change depending on the answer. So that's why sections can come in really useful for that. So any other questions? No? Okay. So I kept you about 40 minutes, which is kind of amazing. I thought it might take a little longer. If you come up with a question at any point, feel free to shoot me an email. I will put it in the chat in case anybody doesn't already have it. Feel free to shoot me an email. I can try to troubleshoot with you virtually. But go in and play with Google Forms. Highly recommend creating a Google account, even if it's attached to your library's email address. It's just really useful to have one and a great place to store documents. And in fact, this video, once it's done, I will put it on my Google Drive and we'll send you all the link to view it that way because the file will be way too big to email. So that's a great way to share documents and files that are way too big. You can put them on your Google Drive and just share the link to that with people. So yeah, go play with Google. It's fun and it's free. It's free. That's the big thing. It's free because you could pay for a survey software like SurveyMonkey, and it's a lot of money. And why bother using that if you can have it for free? So you are all very welcome. So yeah, if you have any questions at any time later on, let me know. And it was great seeing you all today, and go have fun and make lots of surveys.